10 rock ballads from 1975 and the brutal stories behind them. Before we get into this list, I need you to understand something. 1975 was not a soft year for rock music. It was a year when real musicians bled into their recordings, when the songs that made it to radio weren't manufactured. They were extracted from actual human pain, actual love, actual crisis. Every track on this countdown has a story underneath it. Some of those stories are uncomfortable. Some of them involve people who almost didn't survive long enough to make the music. And one of them involves a ghost who walked into a recording studio unannounced. Stay until the end, because number one didn't just change rock music, it changed what a song was legally allowed to be. And the executives who tried to kill it almost won. 10 songs, 1 year. Here's what actually happened. Electric Light Orchestra, Strange Magic. ELO recorded Strange Magic for their 1975 album Face the Music on United Artists Records. Jeff Lynne wrote it, produced it, and engineered every layer of it himself. The concept behind ELO was simple and radical at the same time. Take rock and roll and saturate it with classical string arrangements. A lot of people in the industry thought that was commercial suicide. Jeff Lynne did not care. He had a specific sound in his head, and he chased it regardless of what the market said. Strange Magic peaked at number 38 on the Billboard Hot 100. That number undersells what the song actually did. On FM radio, the album-oriented, music-first stations that serious listeners were tuned to, this track was a constant. DJs used it because it functioned at any hour and in any atmosphere. It didn't demand attention. It created it slowly. Here's the detail that gets left out of most conversations about this song. The string arrangements were so densely layered and so meticulously mixed that audiophiles started using it as a reference track. Hi-fi shops in the mid-1970s would drop the needle on Strange Magic to demonstrate the capability of high-end speaker systems to customers. A rock ballad about love and mystery became a benchmark for audio equipment quality. That is not a small thing. What buried Strange Magic wasn't bad reception. It was everything ELO did next. Mr. Blue Sky, Evil Woman, Living Thing, those became the cultural touchstones. Strange Magic got absorbed into the background of the band's early catalog, and younger fans never found their way back to it. If you know this song, you know why it belongs on this list. If you don't, fix that today. Peter Frampton, Show Me the Way. The studio version of Show Me the Way appeared on the album simply titled Frampton in 1975 on A&M Records. Frampton had already put in years with Humble Pie before going solo, but this album was the inflection point, the moment between being known and being massive. He wrote the song because he needed to, not because a label told him to. The subject is searching for direction when everything around you feels unstable. That theme landed with a specific precision in 1975 because the audience was made up of people who had just come through Vietnam, through Watergate, through years of national and cultural chaos. A song about needing someone to show you toward the light wasn't abstract. It was biographical for millions of people. 1 year after this studio recording, the live version from Frampton Comes Alive turned him into a genuine phenomenon. That album sold over 8 million copies in the United States alone. The talkbox version of this song became the version everyone knows, but Peter Frampton has been direct in interviews about what that kind of overnight transformation actually felt like. It scared him. 1 year he was in small clubs. The next he was filling arenas. The studio version of Show Me the Way is where that trajectory started. It is quieter, more exposed, and structurally simpler than the live version. What you hear on the original recording is the songwriter before the showman took over. That version of Frampton is the one people should know. Styx, Lady. Not every song on this list comes from a dark place. Lady is the exception. Dennis DeYoung wrote Lady for his wife Suzanne. That is the complete origin story. No heartbreak, no crisis, no conflict. Just a man in love who picked up a pen and wrote something down. Styx recorded it for their album Equinox in 1975 on the Wooden Nickel label, and it climbed to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. For a band that was still building its audience at that point, a top 10 single was significant. But the more important thing the song did was establish the Styx sound. Theatrical, orchestrated, emotionally unguarded in a year when a lot of rock was trying hard to be cool and detached. Lady didn't try to be cool. It committed fully to being beautiful. And it worked. Here's the business detail worth knowing. Styx had actually released Lady 2 years earlier in 1973. It went nowhere. The label re-released it in 1975, and the song became a hit. Same recording, different moment. That's the music industry in its purest form. Timing frequently matters more than quality, and quality without the right timing doesn't always get a second chance. Lady got one. It used it. The songs that followed, Come Sail Away, Renegade, Mr. Roboto, became the Styx tracks that dominate cultural memory. Lady gets treated as a footnote now, but it is the song that opened the door to everything that came after. Without it charting in 1975, the Styx story may look very different. If you're getting value out of this breakdown, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We go this deep on every countdown. You don't want to miss what's coming up, because number 3 on this list involves a real intervention and a name that will surprise you. Rod Stewart, Sailing. Rod Stewart did not write Sailing. That matters, so let's be clear about it up front. The song was written by Gavin Sutherland of the Sutherland Brothers, who released their own version first. Rod Stewart heard it, recorded it, and delivered a version that elevated the song into something that became genuinely part of British national identity. It was produced by Tom Dowd and released on the album Atlantic Crossing in August 1975 on Riva Records. It hit number 1 in the UK immediately. Then the BBC used it as the theme for their documentary series Sailor, which followed life aboard a Royal Navy vessel. That television association sent Sailing back into the UK charts for a second run. It went back to number 1. The same song, same recording, 2 separate chart runs to the top position. That almost never happens in popular music, and it speaks directly to how deeply this track embedded itself into the British public. In America, the Rod Stewart tracks that defined his reputation were Maggie May and Tonight's the Night. Sailing never reached equivalent heights in the US market. If you grew up in America, there is a real chance you've never given this song the attention it deserves. That's a significant gap in the 1975 record. Jefferson Starship, Miracles. Jefferson Starship released Miracles as part of the album Red Octopus in 1975, and the song runs 9 minutes. In 1975, on a commercial album aimed at a mainstream audience, 9 minutes was a statement. Jefferson Starship didn't negotiate with that reality. They put it out. The band had evolved from Jefferson Airplane, the San Francisco psychedelic act that had been central to late 1960s counterculture. By 1975, the political edge had softened, the lineup had shifted, and the result was the most commercially successful record the band ever made. Miracles was the engine of that success. Written by David Freiberg, it peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. Grace Slick's vocal performance on this track is among the most powerful of her career. The song was produced by Larry Cox and recorded at the record plant in San Francisco. Red Octopus sold over 4 million copies. That was the commercial peak for this version of the band. The backlash from original Jefferson Airplane loyalists was immediate and intense. They called it a sellout. They dismissed the Starship era as pop compromise. But the audience made their position clear in sales numbers, and Miracles was the primary reason. Rock history has not been fair to Jefferson Starship. The critical consensus preserves Jefferson Airplane as the credible, important act, and writes off everything that followed as commercial filler. Miracles is a genuinely well-constructed piece of music that deserves to be assessed on its own terms, not filtered through what the band used to be. Bad Company, Feel Like Making Love. Bad Company had built their identity on hard rock. Thick riffs, Paul Rodgers' voice at full power, no sentimentality. So when they slowed everything down to a near whisper, the contrast hit like a wall. Feel Like Making Love came from the album Straight Shooter, released in 1975 on Swan Song Records, Led Zeppelin's own label. That context tells you exactly where Bad Company stood in the rock hierarchy at that point. Paul Rodgers wrote the song and has stated in interviews that it came together in a single sitting. The simplicity was intentional. He wanted honesty and directness, no studio excess, no production tricks. Just the emotion, stated plainly. The song peaked at number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. What the song demonstrated was the range of Paul Rodgers as a vocalist. On a track like Can't Get Enough, he's a force of volume. On this one, he barely lifts above a murmur and completely commands the recording. That level of control is rare. Most vocalists known for power struggle when asked to dial it back. Rodgers made restraint sound effortless. Bad Company's catalog gets remembered through its harder material. The ballad side of the band, the more intimate recordings, tend to get overlooked in the broader narrative about who they were. If you want a complete understanding of what Paul Rodgers was capable of as a songwriter and singer, this is the starting point. She has described sitting with a difficult question about whether to continue in music or walk away entirely. The song came out of that confrontation with herself. It was included on Fleetwood Mac's self-titled 1975 album, the record that introduced the classic lineup and fundamentally changed the direction of the band. That album was crowded with material that became iconic. Landslide was not released as a single. There was no promotional campaign behind it. It was an album track that people found on their own, and they kept finding it, decade after decade. The Smashing Pumpkins covered it. The Chicks covered it. Dozens of artists have returned to it because the emotional architecture of the song is nearly perfect. It captures the experience of standing at a crossroads and having to choose who you're going to be next, and it does it in language simple enough that almost anyone can locate themselves in it. The song did not become a recognized classic overnight. It built slowly, accumulating meaning across generations. That's a different kind of success than a #1 single. It's more durable. Elton John, Someone Saved My Life Tonight. Someone Saved My Life Tonight was released on the album Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy in 1975 on DJM Records and MCA Records. That album became the first in history to debut at #1 on the Billboard 200. It had never been done before. This song was the emotional core of the record. Elton John and Bernie Taupin wrote it together, as they wrote nearly everything. But this one was different, in a specific way. It was autobiographical in a way that made both of them uncomfortable, and the story behind it is darker than most people know. The song tells the true story of what happened to Bernie Taupin in the late 1960s. He had become engaged to a woman, and by most accounts available from interviews over the years, the relationship was the wrong one. He was deeply unhappy. He felt trapped. In one of his lowest moments, it has been documented across multiple accounts that he came close to doing something drastic, something that would have either changed everything or ended everything. The man who intervened was Long John Baldry, a legendary British blues singer and a close personal friend and mentor to both Bernie and Elton. Different accounts of that night exist. Some place Baldry sitting with Bernie through the night. Some accounts include Elton being present as well. What both Elton and Bernie have confirmed in interviews across multiple decades is that Baldry played a direct role in pulling Bernie back from the edge and in encouraging him to end the engagement. The woman referenced in the song was a real person. She was alive when the record was released. She woke up and heard herself referenced, however indirectly, in one of the biggest rock songs of 1975. Accounts differ on how she responded. Some suggest she was deeply hurt by how the relationship was characterized. The full picture remains incomplete. The broader context is important here. Bob Dylan had already demonstrated that a songwriter could mine real life directly. Joni Mitchell had done the same. By 1975, Elton and Bernie were operating in that tradition. Real names, real events, thinly disguised but recognizable to anyone close to the situation. The music industry had no framework for addressing what this meant for the people who found themselves inside the songs. Labels didn't see a problem. The people in the lyrics had no standing. What the personal weight of the backstory does to the listening experience is significant. When you know what the song is actually about, the piano feels heavier. Every line carries more. Someone Saved My Life Tonight is not a ballad about a vague romantic situation. It is a document, a specific account of a real night, real fear, and a real person who showed up at the right moment. Elton and Bernie made sure of that by packaging the album with full lyric sheets and 2 booklets, something almost unheard of for a mainstream rock release at the time. They needed listeners to read the words. They needed the record to be understood as autobiography. We are 2 songs from the end. Number 2 involves a man who was technically still alive, but everyone who loved him had already lost him, and the ghost showed up in person. Stay with us. Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here. Wish You Were Here was the title track of Pink Floyd's 1975 album, released on Harvest Records and Columbia Records. The album was recorded at Abbey Road Studios in London. The song runs 4.5 minutes and was written by Roger Waters and David Gilmour. It was written for Syd Barrett, the founding creative force of Pink Floyd, who had left the band in 1968 as his mental health deteriorated beyond the point where he could function within the group. Syd Barrett was still alive in 1975. He was living in something close to complete isolation. He was not dead, but the person his bandmates had known had essentially disappeared. Roger Waters has spoken extensively over the years about the complexity of what he felt about Syd. Guilt, responsibility, love, the sense that the band had moved on and built something successful, while the person who had originally created the foundation of that success was unreachable. Wish You Were Here was the attempt to put all of that into music, acoustic, restrained, and specific in its grief. During the recording sessions for the album at Abbey Road, a heavy-set, shaved-headed man walked into the studio unannounced. The band did not recognize him immediately. When they realized it was Syd Barrett, the reaction was severe. Roger Waters reportedly wept. David Gilmour was visibly shaken. Syd had come in off the street, unannounced, unrecognized at first by his former bandmates. He sat with them for a period of time, made comments about the new album, and then left. He died in 2006, having spent the last 3 decades of his life in near-total isolation. The song they were recording that day because of him outlived everything. It appears in films, in funerals, in graduation ceremonies, in late-night radio playlists on 6 continents. It has been covered hundreds of times. The Syd Barrett element of the story often gets compressed into a single sentence in most tellings. The full weight of it, the grief for a living person, the guilt, the strange and devastating final meeting in the studio on the day they were finishing a song written for him. That's the actual story, and it is as powerful as anything in the song itself. Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. Bohemian Rhapsody was released as a single on October 31st, 1975, Halloween, and appeared on Queen's 4th studio album, A Night at the Opera, on EMI Records. It was produced by Roy Thomas Baker and the band. Freddie Mercury wrote every element of it. The song runs just under 6 minutes. It has no traditional chorus. It moves through 3 completely distinct structural sections: a piano ballad opening, an operatic middle section built on layered vocal harmonies of increasing complexity, and a hard rock finale, before returning to a quiet, resigned close. No other song in mainstream rock had been built this way. The recording took 3 weeks. The operatic section required so many vocal overdubs that the tape itself became thin and nearly translucent from the number of times it passed through the machine. The team was recording on 2-inch tape, which has physical limits. They were approaching those limits. EMI executives told the band the song was too long to release as a single. 6 minutes of something this structurally unusual had no place on commercial radio, and they said so directly. The standard single length in 1975 was between 2.5 and 3.5 minutes. Bohemian Rhapsody was nearly double that. DJ Kenny Everett received an advance copy reportedly on the understanding that he would not air it. He played it anyway. Listener response was so immediate and so overwhelming that the pressure became impossible to resist. The song was released as a single. It hit #1 in the United Kingdom and stayed there for 9 consecutive weeks. Freddie Mercury has been quoted describing the operatic middle section as arriving to him largely fully formed. He kept notes that looked less like song lyrics and more like architectural schematics, specific directions for how each layer of vocal should stack and interact. The vision was complete in his mind before the recording began. The execution, given the technical limitations of the era, was the difficult part. In 1992, the song appeared in Wayne's World and was introduced to a new generation that had no frame of reference for what 1975 rock sounded like. It became a streaming-era phenomenon. It has never left the active cultural conversation, not once, in 50 years. Bohemian Rhapsody is number one on this list, not because it is the most famous track here, though it is, but because it was the most structurally audacious. In a year full of songs built on genuine emotion, genuine pain, and genuine craft, this one went somewhere no one else attempted. It ignored every industry rule about what a single had to be. It ignored the executives who said no. It was built anyway, released anyway, and it proved that if the vision is clear enough and the execution is disciplined enough, the ceiling in rock music does not exist. 10 songs, 1 year. All of them built on something real. A man who nearly didn't make it through the night. A ghost who walked into a recording studio. A woman who heard herself in a rock song she never asked to be part of. A band that recorded for a friend they'd already lost. 1975 produced rock music that had weight because the people making it had stakes. They weren't manufacturing product, they were processing reality. If this breakdown gave you something, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Every video we make goes this deep. There are decades of buried rock history left to dig through, and we're not stopping. Drop in the comments, which of these 10 did you already know, and which one hit different once you heard the real story behind it? We'll see you in the next one.